So far, so good with the LTS hybrid engine. So this is a 2020 L83 5.3 or 2019, one of those 2 years. And I've got 243 casting heads, an LS camshaft, so it'd be a stock cam from a Gen 3. I've got the Gen 3 cam sensor, which lines up with the reluctor wheel on the end of the camshaft in the Gen 3 location. I've made a thin valley cover, so hopefully this is not too far away from the camshaft. It's compared to on the Gen 3 engine. You can see that sensor goes down flush with the valley cover top deck surface there. So hopefully that little bit of a difference from the thickness of that sheet of aluminum doesn't stop that from reading. We're going to experiment and test it out. The Gen 3 crank position sensor fits in there. We've got a 24 tooth reluctor wheel crankshaft, Gen 3 crankshaft in there. So it's back to a 6 bolt. Everything's working good. The push rod length is correct. All the rockers move the way they should. Everything's all fine and dandy with the valve train. We've got all normal LS7 style lifters in there and LS trays. So the advantages, I think, of doing this are L83 blocks and cores are plentiful. Like they're everywhere. I picked this one up for $200 complete, and I've got a set of good heads that I can sell to probably reclaim that cost. So basically, you get the engine block for free. It has piston oil squirters. That is awesome. I don't think there's very many LS engines that had the piston oil squirters, and that's a big advantage for a boosted engine because it'll keep the piston cool and everything lubricated well on the wrist pin and all that stuff. This block is stronger than an LC9 and LH6, so I've heard. It has webbing, extra webbing in the coolant passages, and it's a newer design. Should hold a lot of boost. We've got a mechanical vacuum pump that's standard. So on the side of the block down here, this vacuum pump bolts onto it, and that can all stay on there if you're wanting to have a mechanical vacuum pump for whatever reason. Boosted engine, that might be useful. The truck L83 water pump clears, like it sits way down low, and the outlet and the inlet are in a good location on it, so it does not interfere with a car intake manifold, which is kind of a pain in the butt when you're doing a swap with one of these engines. You're trying to use an LS1 or an LS2 intake. The water pump always gets in the way, so you have to buy a car accessory drive and blah, blah, blah. So we can just use cheap truck stuff, and it'll work with the car intake, it looks like. With the LS heads, instead of the LT heads, we're going to have a lot of choices for fuel injectors, and they're going to be way cheaper than the typical LT4 fuel pump and injectors, which is like $2,500 now with all the tariffs and crap going on. And the exchange rate, the prices of all that stuff went way, way up. And then those direct injectors are still not big enough for a lot of boosted applications, so we won't have that issue here. We've got way more camshaft choices. The LTs are still fairly new. There's a lot of stuff on the market, but everything's more expensive and less common, and you're always stuck with the VVT cam on the front and that single bolt. Yeah, I don't like any of that stuff. We've got stronger head bolts. So the LTs use 12 millimeter head bolts instead of 11. And they fit right in. I didn't have to drill or modify these LS heads at all. The only thing I had to do was move the dowels from the top down to the bottom. So I just used a Unibit and hogged out the bottom 2 head bolt holes until the dowel would fit in there, and then Bob's your uncle, it bolts right on just fine using the LS head gaskets, and you just have to block off these 3 middle bolt holes because they would be open into the crankcase. These ones here are sealed up by the head gasket, so they're not an issue, but the 3 middle holes, I just plugged them with Right Stuff silicone. I guess you could drill them and tap them for 1/8 NPT plugs if you so desire. And yeah, I'm really curious to see how this is going to work. The camshaft, so it is a little bit shorter than the LT one, but it still rides in the bearing fine. I'm happy with that. It's just the oiling I'm not too sure about. So what I plan on doing is making a cap for the end of the cam bearing journal area there to hold in the oil, and I'm also going to plug the hole in the end of the camshaft so it fills that cavity and forces the oil over the cam in between the bearing, so that all that stays nice and lubricated. The oil pressure pole I plugged off on the top. Same thing with all the DOD ports. Those are all plugged. And if you want oil pressure, I guess there's a couple different places you can get it from. If you're not using the vacuum pump, you'll have an oil pressure port right here, or you can get your oil pressure off of the oil cooler delete. This oil pan is an L8T oil pan I had left over, but it fits just fine. Yeah, lots of progress. I really think this is going to work. I'm super excited to hear this thing run. And if it does run well and everything's good, I plan on putting my Stage 2 turbo cam and dual valve spring kit in this and running it in the Passat with a turbocharger and boosting it. These holes on the front here I'm just going to plug off because we're not using the VVT or the variable oil pump or any of that crap. The oil pump I'm hoping just defaults to full pressure with the solenoid unplugged. If not, I'll have to modify that, but we're going to just try it out and see what the oil pressure is like. And this cover is different than the LS, so you're kind of stuck with using this big fat cover for the VVT and all that, but so far so good. We're gonna hear it run here probably in a week. I just have to get some good Gen 4 5.3 pistons and rods. I've only got 6, and I can't find another 2 that are like the ones I have, so I'm just gonna buy another engine, I think, for the pistons and rods. I'll keep you up to date on this project.